Today at the UN. Thank you, Mike, for organising this. Thank you, Yanis, for your introduction. I haven't been to the UN before, and already I found it quite an inspiring situation to see a municipal organisation with truly global intentions. Is very, very exciting. Although one of my friends says that he is surprised that the building does not smell of chlorine. There is a certain atmosphere to the place, a certain atmosphere to buildings with this kind of intention. The reason I am here is both as a recovering drug addict and as an advocate for change in global drug policy and legislation. As a person that lived as a drug addict for ages and ages, I know that the criminal judicial approach to drugs does not work. It's completely ineffective. One thing, drug addicts do not care about the legal status of the drugs they are taking. Drug addicts will take drugs under any circumstances. All that the legislation around drugs can achieve is make it a more punitive, negative, pejorative, damning enclave will develop where an insular debate affects the main narrative. This cannot be allowed to happen. We must have absolute consensus. I suppose the democratic process doesn't afford that. Oh, this is what I learned today from talking to people. I spoke to the fella from Portugal. What's his name, mate?
João.
I spoke to João from Portugal. He was lovely. He said that for the last 11 years they've changed their legislation in Portugal, that HIV infection has dropped dramatically, that AIDS has dropped dramatically. I spoke to a fella from Switzerland. I didn't even know he was a policeman. I spoke to him for about 15 minutes. He was a policeman. Anything could have happened. My life was in my hands there for a moment. I was there, cheek by jowl with authority. He told me that even from a conservative perspective, the penalisation and prosecution of drug addicts doesn't make any social sense. I spoke to people this morning that have told me that there isn't no real global consensus around drugs. Like, for example, in Uruguay, cannabis is being made legal, whereas in Singapore, you can get the death penalty for using cannabis. He said that he asked that geezer, what's he called? Fedorov. He asked that geezer Fedotov about the consensus. He goes, hey, how can you have it that some people are getting death penalty and some places it's completely legal and call it a consensus? He said, it's a very broad consensus. Mate, seriously. I think, look, there's microphones here, sound is being catered for. My friend, you're going to have to change your personal priorities. Eliminate them. I was using drugs because I was in a great deal of spiritual, emotional and physical pain, and what I needed was a solution to those problems. And what was provided for me to reach that solution was a context of compassion and tolerance. What bigger context is there than the planet as a whole? If we can create a planetary context where drug addicts are treated as people with a health issue, not a judicial criminal issue, that will create the perfect context for us to advance. Of course, as well, there is like a human rights and freedom type issue. I suppose if people want to recreationally use drugs and it ain't harming anybody else, it's not really anybody's business. I mean, sort of broadly speaking, is it? So, but what I've also worked out is that nobody at all is helped by drugs being made illegal, unless, of course, there is a conspiracy to marginalise, condemn and persecute disenfranchised members of our global community. And I'd hate to think that that was the situation, that certain countries didn't matter, that certain classes didn't matter, that certain races didn't matter. So unless that's the situation, there's literally no reason to proceed with this experiment of prohibition, which has lasted for a century, that has done nothing but bring death, suffering, crime, create a negative economy, and deaths all over Mexico, deaths all over Malaysia, unnecessary death penalties. You'll notice I'm saying the word death a lot. So what I think we need to look at is an alternative way of thinking, an alternative approach of consciousness, and I'm very, very grateful to be a part of it. If any of you got any questions, I'm almost certain of two things. One, I will try my best to answer them, and two, I won't know the answer. I look forward to chatting to you all. So sit down now, Mike, what's your name?
That would be great. Yeah. This Support Don't Punish campaign represents the sort of things Russell was just saying. If we could take a few minutes before we take questions just to take a few words from somebody who's been involved in that campaign in her own country, Mauritius. Is it okay?
Shall I endorse Support Don't Punish, something I forgot to do during my oratory explosion of a few minutes ago? Support Don't Punish is a really bloody good thing. As the word suggests, support people with a health issue, don't punish them. I endorse it and support it. Sorry I forgot to mention it. I got carried away because it sort of seemed like an intergalactic sort of scene from a Star Wars movie. People have got crazy hair. Someone with normal hair to be on our fucking side.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Russell. So I'm Natalie Rose from Cape Mauritius, and I've been a participant in the Support Don't Punish campaign because in my organization we don't believe that people who use drugs should be sent to jail. In my country, harsh drug policies send people to jail where they do not have access to needles, where they do not have access to condoms, and harsh drug policies also hinders access to existing services for people who use drugs within the community. So we believe that this kind of approach is not effective, as it has rightly been mentioned by my two colleagues here. So moreover, the fact that drug law debate is non-existent in a lot of developing countries, namely from where I come from my region, African region, there is a lack of debate from the state level on the need to reform our drug laws, and we see this as a concern. So just to finish, I've been given only a couple of minutes, I would just like to mention a situation about the Crimea, as you might all be aware. With the taking over these days, people who use drugs in this part of the world are facing the probability that the health services that are being given to them are cut. For example, there are about 800 people that use methadone in Crimea, and now with the political takeover, it looks like the methadone will be cancelled. And it is important that there is a UN stand on this issue, because people are being given life-saving services, and it's most probably that it's going to be cut just because of some political problems that they're having. So we think then, just to finish, that all situation with harsh drug policies and also lack of debate hinders access to services for people who use drugs, and is a problem in terms of public health and also human rights. So thank you very much.
Going back to your magic wand remark that you just made, I noticed you mentioned it would be good if people could live without chemicals and toxins. Do you include cannabis, which is a plant? Do you put it like in this drug category, or do you think it's something very different from the other types of illegal drugs?
I suppose that comment was kind of a sort of a utopian ideology, sort of unfettered from the bounds of reality and convention, mate. But what I mean broadly is, if people are going to use drugs, create a context where it's safe. Personally, I'm not interested in making distinctions of those sort of medical and criminal implications of cannabis use. I can see a more moderate and more obvious pharmaceutical illicit drugs.
And what you mean by support, because as a recovered user, in the UK we're very good at giving people medicine and just sending them away again, but what do you think in terms of supporting people with drug problems? What do you think would be the most effective way?
For me, if people who have a problem with drugs, that the intention ought to be abstinence-based recovery. I can see that harm reduction may be part of that journey, but the intention should be to live drug-free. That is what has worked for me, and that's the only thing I'm in a position to advocate. That's my definition of recovery.
Hi Russell, I'm Graham DeBar from Students for Central and Drug Policy Ireland. I'd like to ask you, what are the harms and benefits of abstinence-based policy and harm reduction in your opinion?
It's a good question, mate. The benefits of abstinence-based recovery is, I think, it gives you a legitimate and genuine opportunity to address whatever problems may exist behind the initial drug use, where like the social, psychological, emotional problems that are masked or temporarily addressed by drug use can't really be approached while drugs are being used. Harm reduction is obviously a lower a lower requirement entry point, so there's an advantage there in extreme cases. For me, as I've said, Sunshine, I reckon what you want is people to be able to make a recovery available to as many people as possible, and people need, I suppose, to be able to individually select the nature of recovery that they think is appropriate for them. For me, it's living drug-free, one day at a time. Other people might want some harm reduction model, but I would say with the intention of abstinence-based recovery, and some people, just want to take drugs, and if it's not a problem, it's not a problem.